Thank you, Kyle. Kia orana. Thank you so much for having us. Really humbled and honored to be here with all of you. And a special thank you to Kyle and the whole PFON team for including us as part of your PFON family. Before I get started, I just wanted to touch back to something that Danny started us out with yesterday. And actually, just a few days before we left Hawaii to come here, I was preparing some ulu in our kitchen, making dinner for the family. Don't remember what I was making right now. And ulu season just started in Hawaii, so we're eating it, multiple times a week. And I have a habit, it might not be a good one, of listening to the news while I cook. I just kind of put it on, kids are busy playing, and I, cook and sort of catch up with the daily news and hearing all the challenges happening around the world, very, reminiscent of everything that we've been talking about here in terms of climate change and health issues and food security. And I just thought, man, ulu is food from the gods. Ulu can just be part of the solution to all of these problems at once, this single crop. And of course, Danny brought up manna. And I am originally from Israel. I was born and spent my early childhood on a kibbutz, which is a cooperative farming community. So your manna analogy resonated for me in a particularly personal way. And I think it brings up just the very strong alignment that we have here in this room. All these people that are gathered here to talk about ulu, to talk about grassroots initiatives for Pacific solutions. I probably said that wrong. We really do share so many values and share a common vision. Even though we approach it from different places and different ways, we all have our role to play. But I just wanted to share that. And additionally, as someone who's not from the Pacific, originally I'm from the Middle East, as I said. I feel extremely fortunate to call the Pacific my home, to be raising my family here. And I really believe that the Pacific has a whole lot to offer the rest of the world in terms of not just some of the grassroots solutions or community-based solutions, but in terms of the perspective, the Pacific worldview. And so, again, just really feel very privileged to be having the opportunity to share with you what we're doing in our small farmer co-op in Hawaii. Now let's see if I can figure out the slides. Okay, so a little bit more about myself, and I promise Noah and I did not plan to both have this photo in our presentations. It's our favorite family photo. So just a little bit of sort of my story coming into this, and our story. And I think the next presentation is going to be about breadfruit festivals. But I think, for those of us who didn't grow up in the Pacific, we all also have our own stories of how we got hooked onto breadfruit. And so mine was actually through a breadfruit festival. In 2011, there was a breadfruit festival in Kona, and I was living on Hawaii Island, organized by Craig and Diane and Auntie Shirley and Andrea Dean, who's not here. And I got roped in by Andrea to volunteer my time, and I got hooked on the culinary side. They had a cooking contest, and I just love cooking, and I just got completely enamored with ulu as a food, as a crop for cooking. And the next year, Noah and I actually met at the following Breadfruit Festival. And that led us on the journey that we're still on. So these Breadfruit Festivals can have huge impacts, personally and for, an entire community. But we started a farm in 2015, which is also structured as a co-op. It's a worker-owned cooperative, and it's called Malakalu Ulu. And it was designed basically to try to restore 4 acres in the historic breadfruit belt of South Kona, which was one of many traditional breadfruit agroforests that were planted in Hawaii, many of which are now gone. But because breadfruit is so prolific and propagates itself vegetatively through the root system, there's still a lot of breadfruit trees all over the place. And so South Kona is one of those regions. We started this farm, as I said, in 2015, and as a single breadfruit farm with a few old trees from way back in the kind of original agroforest days. We just didn't have enough to really turn it into a business. And we planted about 100 trees, but they were young. And so what do we do in the meantime? And that question really led us on the path of exploring and then finally founding the Hawaii Ulu Cooperative. So about a year after we started our farm, there were a few big issues that came up, not just for us, but for other farmers. And by the way, I think many of us were inspired by the Breadfruit festivals, as well as the Tree of Life program that the Breadfruit Institute championed, where they actually gave away many trees, including to farmers. And so we were not the only farm, the only young farm in this situation, where we had breadfruit trees. Some of them were fruiting, many more were young and not fruiting, and we needed a market. And indigenous crops, as Noelle was sharing, they tend to be underutilized, marginalized, in some cases stigmatized, and that's certainly the case in Hawaii today, resulting in a lack of consumer familiarity. So it's not as simple as bring all your ulu together in a basket and go to the market and sell it. We actually have to re-educate our local community about what to do with it and how to eat it and why it's important. For ulu, there's some additional challenges that made it really hard for farmers to market their crop. That includes the very low shelf life. If you don't have refrigeration, your fruit can go from mature to ripe in 48 hours. The intense seasonality, and even though the seasonality can sort of be evened out by having different varieties, you still have most of your fruit coming over a short amount of time. And then thirdly, in Hawaii, because it is sort of a new or a returning, crop, the supply is really low compared to demand. So for us as a single farm selling ulu, we could only supply, maybe 1 or 2 restaurants. And if we start freezing our crop, it's still gone within 2 months. And how is a chef going to keep that product on the menu? And so value adding is clearly the key to building the market, but this is prohibitively expensive for most individual farmers. Developing a value-added product can be capital intensive and time intensive, and so it's not feasible for most individual growers. And so that led us to exploring the potential for a viable farmer cooperative in Hawaii. And in 2016, we formed with 9 members from all over Hawaii Island. We've grown a lot since then, and I'll share with you our current numbers in the next slide. But this is basically our organizational structure. We're a very traditional farmer-owned cooperative. The farmers own the business. They all buy 1 share of common voting stock. We have a democratic governance structure where the farmers elect a board of directors from among themselves. The board hires myself, the general manager, sets the pay price every year, admits new members when new members apply, so it's completely farmer directed. And then I, as the general manager, hire the rest of the staff. We currently have around 20 to 25 employees at any time. And the rest of the value chain is pretty much what the employees do. So we aggregate crop from our farmers to reach economies of scale. We process and add value to extend the shelf life. We didn't come into this wanting to be a processor, but we had to because of the unique characteristics of ulu. And then we market the products to individual consumers and businesses. We do a lot of education to build supply because it wasn't already there. Hopefully our product gets sold, and at the end of the year, any profits that we make are redistributed back to the farmers according to patronage, which is a co-op term referring to each farmer's relative contribution to the whole. So if our farm contributes 10% of the cooperative's breadfruit in a given year, then we would be entitled to 10% of the profits that are redistributed back at the end of the year. And of course, the board can also retain earnings to reinvest in the business to ensure the business's sustainability. So that's how it works, and this has been our growth over the years. So the fiscal years on the x-axis, our fiscal year is July to June. So the first fiscal year, 2017, started July of 2016, and ended June of 2017. So you can see by the end of the first year, we were up to 12, and it's basically grown very organically since then. It was fiscal year 2019, but calendar year 2018, we got our first neighbor island member, which is Hana Ranch on Maui. And now we have 7 members in total on the neighbor islands, but most of our members are still on Hawaii Island. Who are our farmers? I just added this slide, even though it doesn't have to do with processing, just to showcase a little bit more as a case study of a farmer organization in Hawaii, and we get asked this question a lot. So we are geographically diverse, as you just saw. We have members across 4 islands currently, and this has meant that we've had to expand our operations geographically. And the top screenshot there are our crop drop-off locations. So now we have 8 crop drop-off locations across 3 islands. We still don't have one on Kauai, but we're hoping to add one this year. We just hired our first Kauai employee. Our new agroforestry manager is actually based on West Kauai, so hopefully that will help establish more resources for our Kauai growers. Collectively, we're the largest ulu grower in Hawaii. We have about 6,500 planted trees. Only about 1,000 are fruiting, fully mature so far. So about 4,500 are still young, really just planted in the last 5 years. On average, our farmers have 32 trees per farm, which is about half an acre if they were planting, only breadfruit, but they don't. They are diversified farmers, pretty much all of them. I don't think I can think of one that only grows ulu. So their trees are spread out in a mixed orchards, in some cases agroforests like on our farm. In other cases, they're home growers. And so 30% actually have 5 trees or less. And 70% are backyard or part-time commercial farmers. So only 30% consider themselves full-time commercial farmers. Demographically, our farmers are very similar to the average farmer in Hawaii with a few exceptions. Our farmers tend to be younger. The average age of our farmers is 50 years old compared to 62 years old on average in Hawaii. Our farmers tend to be newer to farming, so 55% are beginning farmers, which means they've been farming for less than 10 years, compared to 31% in Hawaii. And they tend to be more often Native Hawaiian, as I think Ku'ule mentioned, Native Hawaiian farmers, there's fewer and fewer Native Hawaiian farmers each year, unfortunately, because of a whole host of other challenges, which it's its own presentation, and I won't get into it now. But only 9% of farmers in Hawaii are Native Hawaiian, and in the co-op, it's 22% currently. These numbers are constantly shifting because we keep getting more farmers in. But I would say the Native Hawaiian percentage is anywhere between about 22 and 30 to 35%. So with every kind of new cohort of additional members, it shifts a little bit. So that's who our farmers are. And this is our product mix. So when we started the co-op, the product that we started with was, I think this is the clicker, there you go. We call this recipe ready ulu. So it's very simple process. You can also think of it as minimal processing. So we just wash and sanitize the fruit, peel it, quarter it, core it, steam it, and freeze it. And then it's ready for the rest of the year. Basically, it preserves it in essentially its pure form for cooking in a wide array of applications. And we initially only did this wholesale, so these are our wholesale cases, 10-pound cases. Since 2016, we've diversified quite a bit. So we now work with a number of other crops that our farmers grow in concert with ulu on their farms. Kalo or taro, uala, sweet potato, and pala'ai, which we consider sort of the winter squash family, like kabocha pumpkin, for example. And we process all of those in the same way. And we've also developed these retail bags for grocery stores and food hubs, basically for home consumers, so they don't have to buy it in 10-pound cases. And we also have a number of value-added products. I brought a few of them with us. We do produce flour. Richard was absolutely right. It is hard to use breadfruit flour if you're not accustomed to it. So a lot of education has to go hand in hand with it. Although I will say that Minoru's breadfruit flour from Tonga, the best breadfruit flour I've ever tried, you can almost use that just like wheat flour. So I think there's more product development and refinement that can be done. And then we have 2 ready-to-eat products. We have an ulu chocolate mousse, we call it, which is a non-dairy frozen dessert made with coconut milk, dark chocolate, and local honey, and ripe ulu, that's the main ingredient. So it's dairy-free and gluten-free. And then we have an ulu hummus, which is like a spread or a dip for sandwiches. So this is pretty much our product line currently. And actually, maybe I'll hop over here first. So there's a few factors that have influenced our product line. In the beginning, it was maturity stage. So we wanted to just make our mature, potato-like, if you're going to use it in place of a potato. We wanted just our mature ulu, in frozen form. That's what we were aiming to sell. But we didn't have great fridges, and a lot of the fruit ripened. And so we had to develop the chocolate mousse, for example, to use up that ripe fruit. Now we actually have about 4 different specs of frozen fruit utilizing all the different maturity stages. So if you want ripe ulu out of season to make a pie, you can buy that. If you want mature ulu to make a potato salad type dish, you can buy that. The other thing is varieties. And when we started, we were actually labeling our product by variety. And we found that the consumer knowledge just wasn't there, and it was confusing them to see, ma'afala or ulumoli or otea on the package. It almost created too much information for them. Also, we couldn't really control in the beginning how much of each variety we were getting. So if someone started with ma'afala and loved it and they wanted more ma'afala, well, we might only have ulumoli available. And so it was another hindrance to just getting people to buy it consistently. And so we started sorting internally as part of our processing operation and actually selecting where each variety goes based on the best application that we've learned for it. So the hybrid, the Altilis marianensis hybrids, those are our favorite varieties for our hummus, for example, because they're light and fluffy. The Polynesian seedless varieties, like ulumoli, are our favorite varieties for the pure frozen because they slice really cleanly and they really hold their shape when they're frozen. So that's how we've dealt with the varietal diversity, but it's definitely it's a major consideration for processors. And then thirdly, manufacturing facilities. So as Richard shared, there's so much opportunity, right, for value-added production, for processing with breadfruit, but small farmer organizations and individual farmers do not have access to all the fancy machinery and equipment that a larger processor would have. And so we are very bound by the capacity that we have in our facilities and with our equipment. This is just a picture here. This is our headquarters. This is in South Kona. We have a second facility now in Hilo, and a few partners, one on Maui and one on Oahu. But we can only make what we're able to make. And as much as we may have, other ideas for additional products in the future, we can't always take that next step. And that whole flow chart that Richard shared about how you develop a new product, getting all the way to commercialization is a lot of work. And so for each new product that you wanna, launch, you have to make sure that you can actually put in that investment, including potentially new equipment, and then still maintain enough supply to fulfill, all of your customer requests. So when I get into some of our next steps, you'll see that the physical infrastructure is a huge one, and that's a big area where we're focusing right now. But back to this slide, so marketing tactics, so essentially how do we sort of build demand for these products? And I just put together a snapshot of some of our main marketing and consumer education approaches. We definitely focus on kind of farmer-centric storytelling, so telling the story of our farmers, helping consumers feel connected to the farmer. And as I mentioned, a lot of our farmers are backyard growers, so it's also connecting folks without an ulu tree to those with an ulu tree. And since the beginning, we've intentionally set a low entry barrier to joining the co-op, where you only need one tree to join, because even just one tree is too much for some families. Attractive packaging, you may have noticed that all of our retail packs, they actually look like the fruit. So it feels more like you're, again, just trying to connect people closely to the source of their food. We've put together a huge recipe database on our website, eatbreadfruit.com. Please check it out if you haven't visited. We recently published a cookbook with Sam Choi, who's one of our celebrity chefs in Hawaii, and that cookbook is on the table over there. And so recipes are huge. Recipes are really, really important, and people love them. Also, just a lot of strategic partnerships. We have a chef ambassador program where we partner with local chefs. Many of them are also educators. I think we have 3 teachers who are chef ambassadors, who are culinary teachers in schools. And then finally, education. And this is really important. I think it's written up in the program, but there was a study that one of NOAA's master students, I think, did a few years ago about ulu consumption patterns in Hawaii. And the study found that on average, Hawaii residents only eat ulu 3 times a year today. And even that number was sort of, the average was brought up by a very small number of people who eat ulu on a very regular basis. They tend to be Pacific Islanders. And then most people never eat ulu at all. And so changing building positive relationships between people and crops really does have to start young. And so we've had a really robust partnership with the farm to school community in Hawaii in a lot of different ways. We were able to actually supply all the public schools in Hawaii for 3 consecutive school years. This is an example of an ulu sweet potato salad that was served on the lunch menu. That partnership sort of went on pause when COVID hit, but we're hopeful that it will come back. And our current main focus is a program called Ho'opili'ai that actually gets these traditional staple crops directly into classrooms and cafeterias with a whole bunch of integrated curriculum so that teachers don't have to deviate from the lesson plan. They can still hit their curriculum requirements while teaching about these crops. And then I just wanted to summarize, the farmer benefits of the co-op model and maybe kind of the relationship with PFON as well. And so I think what I really love about the co-op model and why I think that our membership has grown so much organically is that we enable farmers to focus on what they love and do best, which is farming. The co-op offers a guaranteed market and stable price for the farmer's fruit so that we're de-risking growing ulu and expanding ulu production. I've listed more services, I guess, or benefits that we offer our farmers. I'll let you guys read those. I won't read them all to you. But I did want to talk briefly about these pictures on the right-hand side. And so PFON offers a lot of educational resources for its farmer organization members that are really valuable. And one of the ones that our team really latched onto was a value chain analysis framework for thinking about how we as a farmer organization are enhancing the value chain for everybody involved, and especially for our farmers, and how we can continue to strengthen the value chain on behalf of the farmers. And so we went through the analysis that was in the PFON handbook. And this is just some of the numbers that we came up with that kind of benchmark where we're at. And this isn't a stagnant place. We're continuously trying to improve. But right now, basically, if we look at this bottom one first, so in the United States, farmers receive on average 14 cents of every dollar spent on food by consumers. And for our farmers, when we're selling the fruit fresh, they make 70 cents to the dollar. And when we're processing the fruit and going through the very longest possible value chain that we currently have, which is a small percentage of the fruit, but nevertheless, we wanted to see where the full spectrum was. Our farmers make on average 25 cents to the dollar. And this is when our recipe-ready packs go all the way to the grocery store shelf through a distributor, through as many linkages as possible. And so we think that's a pretty good starting place. And as I said, we are continuously working to improve this. But this is where we're at now. And if you're interested in sort of learning more about the value chain framework for farmer organizations, or specifically what the Ulu Co-op is doing, we have a whole blog about this on our website, eatbreadfruit.com. I meant to put logos and product examples of our customers, but I didn't have time. But I did just want to share sort of a sense of where our products go. So we're really committed to increasing access to the local community. We have a policy where we don't export any of our fruit, even though there's a lot of demand from especially Pacific Islander communities in the United States on the West Coast, but all over the US. We actually don't ship at all out of state. And the reason is that Hawaii is really food secure, right? We import 85 to 90% of our food overall, but over 99% of our staple crops, which is an incredibly precarious situation to be in the face of climate change and geopolitical unrest and so forth. So we really want to put the extra effort into building local demand. And if local demand can't meet our supply, then to support our farmers, we'll look at exporting. But that's basically never our intent. And we think that, the market is big enough to hopefully never have to do that if we can develop right. Yeah. And this list is actually in order of size. So our biggest market is community nonprofits, and that started to be a thing during COVID when food banks actually couldn't get rice, and a lot of people lost their jobs because of the economic downturn of COVID. We were able to supply them with ulu and kalo. And it was just an eye-opener for a lot of these larger institutions that are looking at the intersection between, food security, health, and economic development. And so we've maintained a lot of those partnerships. But food hubs, manufacturers, food service, grocers, these are all within Hawaii. And they are, by far and large, going to local community members. So that's something that we're also continuously trying to remind ourselves and make sure that we can get stronger in that area. And then Kyle asked me to share a little bit about what's next for us as a farmer organization that also does food processing. So here's a quick 5-point snapshot. As I mentioned, infrastructure is a huge bottleneck, really, in terms of both handling the increasing volume coming from our farmers, but also adding more products to our product line. And so we're really focusing on finishing up some big facility renovations, which are, years in the planning, and hopefully within the next 24 months, we'll have most of them complete. Farmer support. So there were a few really great, background music. So there were a few really great grant programs that actually came out of the U.S. federal government recently called Climate Smart Commodity Agriculture. And it was all about getting actually funding directly into farmers' pockets. And so the co-op is a partner on 2 of those grants. And over the next 5 years, we're going to be facilitating the disbursement of funds directly to farmers to help expand ulu agroforestry systems. So that's going to be a big focus. There we go. Okay. Continued consumer education. I don't think that'll ever end, but definitely will continue to be a focus. Product line refinement and continued R&D. I think at this point, we're trying to hone in on products that we can really keep stocked and produce at a high quality, but that's also a continuous effort. And then ongoing check-ins internally with our farmer members and our staff. And I think that's something that all of us farmer organizations do and really need to make sure that we do on a very regular basis to ensure that we remain relevant and responsive to our members. And so I know for the co-op, it's a really big deal. We have a big annual member meeting with all of our growers and then a regional meeting about 6 months later, where we go out into the regions where we have farmer members to kind of get their feedback and connect and make sure that we're staying aligned and in touch with their needs. And that is it. Thank you so much. Mahalo.